Okay, so it's Ekaterina from World Jewish Relief. So thank you very much for organizing the event and for the report. Extremely important topic. And I agree with everything which was said about the importance of working with young people and preparing them, opening their mind,
There's a butt
building
coming.
their confidence. All of those things are great. But also, I think there's this big elephant in the room, and this is economic opportunities in these communities, and we haven't touched upon that. All these lovely stories about chicken and bakeries and things, I would like to see the numbers. I would like to see how much he's making per month, really. What is this business delivering? When we're saying, it is successful, what do we mean? How much money the person's making per month? And we see lots of heartwarming stories, but we don't see much hard financial evidence. So we're running the project in Rwanda to transform young people into agricultural entrepreneurs. And we were lucky to identify 3 crops. One is watermelons, another one passion fruits, which can deliver about, I would say, 400 pounds a month income for successful people, really. And we really struggle to expand it and to identify more businesses and opportunities like that, which can deliver that level of income, really. So majority of things they can be doing, opening shops, running market stalls, doing some sewing or chicken or whatever, are not even reaching 100 pounds. Yeah. So I would love to hear more about specific opportunities and whether ODI or there are other organizations which are working on researching maybe sector-wide opportunities which can be kind of given as a recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's a great question. There's so much rhetoric about entrepreneurship these days. It feels sometimes that the person that's still in a low-skilled, informal job, that he's now branded an entrepreneur and we can think he's doing fine, but he's actually just in the same, or she is in the same state as previously. Perhaps you could give us an example from that. I mean, how much is Ariel making? Is it serious business or is it just?
Yes. Thanks for the questions. And as I said, it's that to promote youth entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship in general in rural communities. It's very important to involve different stakeholders. And as I mentioned, in the program we had in Nicaragua, we involved also local authorities, so local governments, and they used to organize different fairs, festivals, events, and we always invited all of our entrepreneurs to these events, and they brought different products to sell, even though they for example, there were some entrepreneurs that their business was hair cutting, but they didn't come to cut hairs in the fairs. They brought food so that they can still have that opportunity to raise money. So just little things like that so that they can start opening the markets. And also, I think it's good to facilitate skills in marketing as well. So that we had this case of this entrepreneur. He had a vegetable plot. Yeah. So he created his own business card, and he went to the town giving his business card to different businesses, hotels, and governments. And now he provides of different plants to some of the businesses. And also there's going to be a new reforestation project in that area from funded by international organization. He has been contacted to be the supplier of 5,000 plants, which is going to boost his business. So these little things will help small businesses to grow and access to new markets and new business opportunities.
Can I jump into that?
Okay. Please do, yeah.
I think one of the challenges of in terms of providing you with the hard financial evidence and data is that this is a project that has only been implemented for a year, so we still need to let it mature a bit more. Also, the question is, 400 pounds is the right amount for Rwanda. We don't know what the right amount for rural Nicaragua or Tanzania is, so that's also that question. But we are seeing certain returns already. For example, and I use this because it's also very hard to compare businesses across because they differ in their sector and the amount of return they're making. So this guy who had the vegetable plot and I visited is making a certain amount of money, but I'll give you the hard evidence I collected on, for example, the bakeries that I visited, and there were 4 of them that are producing about 600 pieces of bread 3 times per week, and that's giving them and they're selling at 1 Cordova per bread. That's 600 Cordovas 3 times per week of income that was not there before, and their investment is very low. How much is a Cordoba?
It's 27 Cordobas per dollar, so it's like
Yeah. So
like
$200 maybe, and that's yeah, $200 per week, and that's a sizable money earning. Yeah, for those rural communities. What we need to understand more now is all the other businesses. That's preliminary data, and this is data that we did not include in the report because we can't tell you every single case, every single business. But as the program matures, they will be able to, and Raleigh is collecting data, will be able to tell you within 1 more year, this is what the situation looks like, this is what we know. But we wanted to do a kind of like go in out there a year after, what can we learn? And as time goes by and the program matures, you will start seeing a lot of more that hard evidence coming out.
If I could just continue, pick up on that question of sectoral of returns. You said you need to re-engineer the way that business is done. We sort of got in our head the Dragon's Den type model of the entrepreneur being the innovator that comes up with a brand new idea no one's thought about. Correct. How realistic is that, especially in rural communities in developing countries that we're primarily talking about?
I think you saw it brilliantly on the film. The young man who was talking about, we talk to all of our entrepreneurs or small business owners. We tend not to talk about entrepreneurs because the word makes people think they're going to be billionaires, etc. We don't care about billionaires. We care about people being able to have a self-respect for themselves, create something of value, and improve their communities. And that criteria is really the baseline. If we can get our return back off our investment, and that individual is left no worse off than they were before, I'd rather that individual was self-respecting and could stand up and say, I'm doing it for my own self, as opposed to going and collecting a fish from somebody else. So I think we have to be careful how we assess what success looks like, but I think your question is incredibly valid in terms of making sure that we're not just supporting things for the supporting of sex. A quick example, we gave 2 young people here in the UK, one we gave £1,500 for a fancy dress business, and one we gave £7,500 for a cleaning company. Which one was most successful after 4 years? Just a show of hands. Who thought the cleaning company was more successful?
Fancy dress.
Okay, fancy dress, yeah? We gave the fancy dress now turns over about £600,000 a year. The cleaning company turns over £600,000 a year and employs over 70 people in Maida Vale and St John's Wood. The fancy dress business we sold last month for just under £1 million. Wow. Just under £1 million. And we had a 5% equity stake in that business.
Did they send their fancy dress to the cleaners?
Oh, they could have. that could have been another one, as opposed to cleaning the buff. Yeah, that could be a different conversation.
We'll take 2 questions actually. The gentleman here and the gentleman there.
Thank you. Tom Sanderson from BBC Media Action. I didn't know that the ICSE programme was focused on rural entrepreneurs. Why can't it be rural and urban? And number 2, how are we going to bring this to scale? I'm interested in bringing Dragon's Den and Apprentice, adapting them for African audiences, and because a lot of role modelling and confidence. But could we use media or communications or online or YouTube to deliver some of the training or the mentoring?
Great point.
Thank you. Great. And the gentleman behind, we'll take 2 at the second.
David Wilkham, Peace Child. Thank you, Raleigh, for sharing all this incredibly valuable information. It's really useful. We need more of this. I have 2 questions. First, I think Tim's mum is absolutely right. Education is really important. And kids go to school in most countries now for about 6 or 7 years. It seems a real shame that they then have to learn the information that's really useful to them in 20 weeks. Why is it that governments do not embed entrepreneurship education in the heart of their education delivery? And what are you guys and people like Raleigh doing to do that? Second question might seem a little bit wonkish, but as Oliver said, entrepreneurship is everywhere these days. Entrepreneurship training is everywhere. Everyone and their mother seems to be doing it. Has ODI developed any kind of metric to measure the cost effectiveness of the different interventions? And if so, what? Thanks.
So, thank you. Sort of 4 questions sneaked into 2. I think 2 will be very quickly answered by Claudia. So that last question about metrics and the first one about rural focus, and that was my interpretation. I might well be wrong on that.
Okay. I don't know the rural versus urban. I don't know why ICSE doesn't concentrate in urban, and I urge you to talk to Stacy or any of the Raleigh team here. They might be able to provide an explanation, but I think it might be just as useful as we see also this whole wave of urbanization going on, right? In terms of how can we use media to deliver content, that it's being explored at the moment by not only Raleigh, but many other organizations. And there is, you know, the whole also brouhaha of MOOCs, and do they actually work, and how do we use them, and the metrics behind. There's so many MOOCs out there when you actually see finishing rates and retention rates, and they look awful, and nobody wants to talk about it. So there is things that we need to explore there even further. Entrepreneurship education, also the $1 million question in the sector. The biggest issue is we can create the curricula. We still rely on teachers who are non-entrepreneurs to deliver entrepreneurship education, when we know that actually very good entrepreneurship education tend to be delivered by people with experience. In terms of cost effectiveness, this is going to be super hard to calculate at any given point, because no one is doing, everybody's doing, we have a fruit salad in front of us. So if we actually want to compare.
You're not helping Tim, you're not
I'm
helping
really
Tim.
hungry now.
If you are actually, for us to do these metrics, we need to have oranges and oranges. And if we just have a fruit salad of every single fruit in this universe that you can think of, it's going to be really hard. And these are kind of the things that I feel the sector is trying to is struggling with, and thinking about how do we get to consensus on skills, on types of finance, so that eventually we can start measuring things like cost effectiveness.
Dennis or Tim, do you have any on the question of education, the kind of stuff kids are learning in school in Nicaragua, for example? Is it helpful at all?
Well, in Nicaragua, there isn't any approach to entrepreneurship during like primary or secondary school. And most of the entrepreneurship is in Nicaragua is pretty much like empiric. So because actually there isn't like platforms that helps people to become entrepreneurs. Like you just do it because you have the need to do it, because there isn't you can't find a job, or you just need to do something because you're struggling economically in your house. So I think, and also the access to resources, as Claudia was mentioning, is very difficult. I consider myself an entrepreneur, and I try to open a business in Nicaragua, but it was very difficult for me to access to finance, because every time I went to a different financial institution, they asked me to at least 1 year to have my business already working, which I was just starting. So I started from scratch. So there wasn't any like sort of source where I could go and find credit. And even though there are some platforms online like crowdfunding, Kickstarter, Kiva, etc., for example, in Nicaragua, it's impossible to access to these platforms, because you like Nicaragua doesn't have the like electronic safety to do that, so you cannot receive money online. Or Kiva only sponsors specific areas like agriculture and others. So it's quite difficult, it's quite challenging, and education doesn't help too much.
We've still got the question of scale that was brought up at the front here. Education was the $1 million question. Scale is the $1 billion question, I suppose, in this context. And part of what we've been discussing today is about how do you get a robust model, how do you get all the pieces of your cake in place, the ingredients with the right measurements. But then how do we get, we're talking today realistically in dozens of beneficiaries. How do we get thousands, tens of thousands, millions of beneficiaries? How do we get this cake into a gigantic cake? What's the kind of, how are we going to bring that scale? How are we going to have Dragon's Den in Tanzania?
My issue, there's too many egos, because going back to the question around rural versus urban environments, is when you show an image on a screen of an individual in a rural environment who's in a destitute place, it makes it much easier for funders to go into lots of places and say, oh, we're going to help little Johnny or Jennifer in this particular environment. Whereas you see somebody in the city who's got a fantastic idea that could help millions of people, it won't attract the same kind of support and investment. That's in my opinion, that's the hard and fast of that. So we need to get rid of that, because I work with the Legatum Institute and other individuals who are phenomenal about being very, very commercial and being very honest and saying we're going to invest in businesses that have scalability, are going to have huge returns and make a huge amount of difference. Because I actually believe that's what we should be doing, and looking for models that are scalable, that aren't just, but without having the necessary support the one-man band who wants to do his own thing on his own right at the same time. I think for us, we want to be able to get rid of the need for one institution doing this and run it, and find a way to consolidate all of the energy that's going around just in this room. If everybody decided to get rid of their branding and decide we're going to put all of our money in a pot, all of our expertise in one particular thing, would make a huge amount of difference. But unfortunately, that won't happen in a short period of time, I don't think. I might not get invited back now, but that's my personal view.
I'm conscious we've got lots of questions coming. We've got 10 more minutes, so let's have some ladies. We'll take 2 questions. Well, let's take 3 questions at the front, but make them all super quick, please.
Sorry, I'm Shri Montke. I just did a 3 weeks research trip to Ethiopia, and I was looking at existing support available to social entrepreneurs in Ethiopia. And I did speak to entrepreneurs there as well. And a theme that came out again and again is the regulatory constraints. The countries, developing countries, they are not easy to do business in. One of the entrepreneurs said it took 2 years for her to get a business license because the category of business license did not exist. I mean, did you do any research on that, and what were the findings? Is programs like ICS are doing anything in terms of addressing those regulatory constraints?
Thank you. Great question.
Hi, my name's Olympia. I work for the Department for International Development in the youth team. I just had a question. You mentioned the role of the family in the success of the young entrepreneurs. And I was wondering, what kind of models work best? Does it work best when the parents are already employed and the young person is doing something to enhance their business? Is it most problematic when the parents are unemployed and you're investing in the young person? And as a model, are you kind of going to be measuring what the kind of cost-benefit analysis of investing in the young person versus, for example, their 40-year-old father and mother, and what kind of returns that could be for the community? Thank you.
Great question.
Anna Seymour from DFID as well. Just a quick question on who. We talk a lot about young people, but actually they're an incredibly diverse group. Are they actually older? Are they actually in their 30s and 40s, the most successful entrepreneurs, or are we talking about genuinely younger people? And just a quick aside as well, it sounds as if there is quite a case for some longitudinal studies really looking at what are the long-term benefits, not only for the entrepreneurs, not only economics, but in terms of their health, in terms of their family, intergenerational, et cetera, et cetera.
Sort of thing that DFID might want to sponsor.
Exactly.
Why don't we jump into regulatory?
Okay, I'm just going to do very quick. Regulatory constraints, they didn't come up as prominent, but one thing that I always wonder, governments still question themselves why businesses are all in the informal sector, why they don't want to join the formal sector. Guess why? Because it takes 2 years to get a license, because it's impossible to unregister if you register, because young people or businesses in general don't understand the regulations. So yes, regulatory constraints are there. Young entrepreneurs are just bypassing them. So there's a lot of learning from that, and I think we need to dig deeper into that, and that's also one of the ongoing questions. About family support, there were a mix. There were parents that were employed. There were parents that were having their own businesses. A lot of them engaged in agriculture. Also parents that were unemployed, and then the young entrepreneurs' businesses very quickly turns into a family business, and the parents are providing help. And I'm not sure how you will do a cost benefit of that. It's, that will have to do a lot of digging and measurements and all that. We have very different cases in Nicaragua and in Tanzania. Nicaragua, very young people starting their businesses. As young, there were some reports as 15. So, these people are very committed, doing their thing and earning money as they go. But in Tanzania, slightly older. It might be because of the sector, because dairy tends to be associated with like older people, but within the early 30s. But most of them were in the 20s range. Longitudinal studies, yes, please. I mean, with all this is what youth entrepreneurship, what we really need in the sector is a few millions of investment on a serious research for 10 years and say, if I train you today and I provide you all of this, in 10 years, where are you? And how do we compare that? And what are the changes that we see? Because we still believe that if we train you and you didn't go and become an entrepreneur, that's a failure of our program. I don't think so. I think that if I train you, you didn't become immediately an entrepreneur. That doesn't mean that in 5 years you didn't become one. And how do I know whether my investment here will actually paid in 5 years' times? I don't know that now. We don't know, and we need more of this to understand. But yet again, I don't need to speak to this room about the financial, political constraints of that kind of funding.
Great, thank you. Is there any other reflections on that role of family, for example? Let's jump out. Yes, the gentleman here and then the lady behind. Sorry, she got there just before.
My name is Rafi. I'm from the Youth Division of the Commonwealth Secretariat. I was wondering if you would please brief us on the minimum educational qualifications of young entrepreneurs, because in many developing countries, there are many students who drop out of school earlier, but those who are graduates, they are risk averse. They want government jobs. They want jobs in the private sector, and entrepreneurship is perhaps the last option for them.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Johanna Newman, and I'm the president of the European Youth Forum. Thank you for organizing this event. It's a very important topic indeed. Just one quick comment on entrepreneurship education. This is also what we identified on the European level being extremely crucial. And it can actually work out. I was happy when I met my sister a couple of months ago. She's 15 and she lives in northern Finland. And she told me that in their school, they're having a course where they are encouraged to start their own businesses. And they are getting the support to do this from the school. So I think it's also not only about providing the information, but it's about creating the spirit and empowering the young person to really be able to start their own business and know how to do it. So there are models of doing this in a very positive way. Then I would have a question about the thing that hasn't been tackled here, and something I hear constantly when I meet young entrepreneurs, and that is the fear of failing. And we also know that a lot of young entrepreneurs, they fail. And I think we have to acknowledge this in order to work with it and create a culture where it's okay to fail. You start the business, you fail. You start the second one and you succeed. And I really would want to have your take on how we can spread this kind of a culture where it's okay to fail.
Tim, let's jump in at the second question.
It's a brilliant point. Both points brilliantly well made. The difficulty culturally, that is not as easy to infect. So the reality is that we would love everybody to be in that American gung-ho, I've failed 20 million times, but I've worked my hard. But the reality is you go into some communities and that just doesn't fly. Even in this community, that doesn't fly. The amount of bankrupt individuals who are tarnished for life here in the UK, can you imagine that same kind of impact in a small place in Kenya, and then everybody within your community supporting you, and then you don't make it? That's a huge amount of pressure to put around young people. But then that's where the organisations have to come in and wrap around services which actually educate not just the individual but the community about what is actually happening here, and then engender the support that comes on from there. I don't want to eradicate the fear of failure. I want to find people who are motivated by the fear of failure to do things differently, because I think we have to. I don't think we can create a nation of entrepreneurs. I don't want a nation of entrepreneurs. I want to find the right people who have the innate ability to do what we're asking certain people to do. There are lots of people I could give you in this room a brilliant business idea. Half of you would never think it was a good idea. A quarter of you would then try it and probably fail. We might find one or two of you who actually might be able to run it. It's how do we get assessment tools that find the right one or two. I worked with Manpower for a long while. We did some assessment approaches in China. and trying to find how you can find entrepreneurial individuals in China, because there was obviously a mentality of just doing what you were told to do, and they wanted to find a bit better ways of being entrepreneurial. There are enough psychometric advances now where we can start to analyse what makes people more likely to be successful using education again, to start to find ways that we can actually hedge our bets and de-risk the investments that we actually made. I don't want a nation of education that teaches people to be entrepreneurs. I think what education does is plant the seed in the right people to think, aha, I could actually do that, and that's what we should be looking for.
Do you feel that there's a danger on that from the investors' side, that there's not an appetite for that sort of risk? So we do one of our longitudinal studies, not that I'm pointing towards
different at all.
But if it did show that we gave 100 million and basically 95 million of it was wasted, these guys have gone back to standard jobs. Only 5% of that was actually used, and of that, of the entrepreneurs that actually got going, kind of only 5% of their businesses have really made an impact in their communities on a massive scale. Are investors ready to accept that?
Yes, in my humble opinion, yes. So speaking with investors here in the UK, when we were talking about starting up Bright Ideas Trust, people from the BVCA, British Venture Capital Association, and some quite influential private equity individuals who we gave the advice to.
Okay, so that's their culture.
That's their culture.
That's their culture. But how about development agencies working?
But then that's why you need investors who are talking to development agencies about the edge, because what they will be able to say and pass on and hopefully share is that you will inevitably, you can't pick winners. You haven't got a crystal ball. It's not the way that investment works. And if you're looking for a 100% return, you are destined to be disappointed. But then what you should be saying is that we're going to place our money in lots of different places, and we'll get 5 or 6 that will fail catastrophically. And we have to be prepared that that's going to happen. But the learning that they'll get, the development, the other stakeholders that will be involved that Dennis talked about, that's a benefit that we can actually find some way to measure and see, does that tick a box? But you'll get 1 or 2 shining stars that will cover your losses if you start to think big enough. That's how venture capital works. It doesn't work off, let's get 100%, because you never do anything.
The gentleman's question about kind of minimum education qualifications.
I think it's a bit of a moot argument to see if somebody who's going to be more successful comes out from university or they start from the Alan Sugar from the ground up with nothing and work really hard. I think, once again, it comes back to the right person. There's a huge amount of very successful businesses that spin out of universities in Cambridge and Oxford and lovely other places around the world, as well as individuals who have had no formal education. And you see the young man on there, I want to go and support his food business. I know he's going to be successful because you can see it in him.
Well, that was the quote. He said, in 5 to 10 years, I would like to be a great businessman.
Correct.
Yeah.
And help my community.
Yeah.
Help my community. It was a bit that really resonated with me.
There's a lady there and a lady here. And we do have one from our online audience. Thanks very much to Frank van Kesteren from Holland. Specific question to Claudia on those loans. Why aren't they working?
I think
very quickly, please.
The issue, it's just the state of the microfinance industry in local communities, and and this is a contested argument, and microfinance has worked well in some cases, and some others there has been harm done at the community level. And in the case of the communities I visited in Tanzania, that was the case. So there is a lot of fear about working with MFIs. And Raleigh is working around interest rates, lowering the interest rates so that it's something that is actually that you can work around, not 50% interest rates, and repayment terms and all that. But when we do this, we also, when we talk about local partners, sometimes those are the local partners that we have, and we have to work around that, and that also poses constraints.
Thank you. So we're just into our last few minutes, so we're going to ask the lady there with the microphone, and there's a lady here that had her hand up before. There are other questions I know in the room. Our panellists will be hanging around afterwards. There'll be a chance for tea and coffee and read the report and what have you, so do clobber them then.
Great, thanks. It's Annie Barber from Youth Business International. Just to say thank you so much for this event. It's really, really relevant to our work especially, and I can't wait to read the report. A lot of the findings that you mentioned just today were really in line with a lot of the things that we're learning in a lot of our programmes. And also I think the question around rural and urban was really interesting, because I think a lot of the findings we've talked about today could be relevant for both rural and urban areas. And I wondered wondered if there were any of the learning came out that was really specific just to rural areas, and any kind of successful strategies for overcoming those, specifically in rural areas. And one more question, if I can, really quickly. Was there anything around gender constraints in any of your findings?
So we'll let you that one. That's a good question.
Thank you.
So I'm Adriana from Peace Child, and I've got so many questions, but I'm going to only ask two. But one had a very quick answer to it. The two questions I'm really interested in, because we do a programme which is very, very similar to everything that's been outlined here, and our findings have been very much in line with them. And we actually do work in rural and urban areas, and the difference between the two areas is immense. And I'm just really interested in terms of the level of education that the people have when they come into your programmes. Because when we're talking about the rural areas, in our case in Sierra Leone and Liberia, they have no literacy at all. So and when we're talking about entrepreneurs, we obviously have to accept we're talking about a very different level of entrepreneurs here, because these people are trading anyway, they're working anyway, and they've got their own businesses. So it's about making those businesses more profitable for them. So yeah, the question was the level of education. But one very quick one. Do you have a way of measuring number of jobs created from each business that's been formed? Because we are trying to measure that at the moment. Our programme's been running for 3 years now. And we're trying to measure that quite carefully, and we need a matrix that we can use really, which says, is it someone who's employed regularly over 12 months at a set amount, or is it everybody who's been employed ever, which would be a large amount, because they might be employed for a day.
Would you like to take the gender question? In Nicaragua, is it 50-50 balance between men and women? Do they approach the businesses differently? Do you train them differently?
Well, actually, around 55% of the young entrepreneurs were women. We had lots of interest from young women as well as other women as well. And I think it's also because of the context, because of most of the young men were working in the farms, in the crops, and so that young women that weren't working or studying had more time, so that they joined the training program. So that I think that's one of the factors that we had more participation.
And did they get support from community members, from their husbands, from their?
Yes, they did definitely.
They got to keep the money.
Yeah.
Okay, rural and urban, there are different ways in which you can approach this. One big discussion in the sector right now is, do we keep providing training and support to entrepreneurs in rural areas and try to keep them and identify opportunities in their local communities, or do we just focus on addressing the huge urbanization wave and trying that those that are moving from rural to urban that have the skills to succeed in cities? That's just an ideological approach, and everybody decides how to want to take that, right? In terms of very specific things that are urban to rural, I think the family issue, you see it also in urban communities, but in rural areas, it was really striking to see how important it was. It was very basic. If you did not get your family support, you did not last in training, you did not start your operations. If there was no community buy-in from the community leaders, the program would have happened. So I think you see it also in urban communities, but even more in rural areas. Level of education, I think, for this program, you need a minimum literacy and numeracy skills, just because of the content that is being delivered. And that has been, particularly in Africa, there's a lot of struggles around that. But and we know that numeracy and literacy skills are important, and some of the volunteers will actually help in navigate even that. So in some cases, so that was a lot to take on for they don't give you the criteria, you have to have 6th grade completed. No, but they expect people to be able at least to have some type of reading abilities and being able to write the most basic things, and they will get support, but it's hard. And in terms of,
just in Nicaragua, we had some cases for people who couldn't read or write at all, but they didn't stop them to join the program. So volunteers were very helpful in that as well. So they most of the training, volunteers were explaining, and then volunteers were helping them to write the business plans down, and it was very useful for. for the volunteers to understand the context of the rural community as well, because like young people have different backgrounds as well. So yeah.
And the question of jobs created, and I want to tie that with the issue of mixed livelihoods. If you are, how are you going to measure a job? What is your definition of a job? Is it the ILO standard definition of a job? And then, you know, we can be here for a week discussing that. So I'm not going to go into that. But then if young people are actually having multiple streams of income, how do you measure that, and how do you define whether a young person is employed or is being successful at the multiple businesses they're doing, and how do we put all of that into a nice little box of metrics? You know, development is a lot more messy than that, and our metrics need to provide for that diversity and to be able to reflect what's actually happening on the ground.
Thank you. Well, I was given a couple of jobs this morning before I turned up. One of them was to thank our panellists, which I would like to do at the moment. They're just everything we hoped for, so thank you very much. And also to thank you for coming along, to giving up your morning to this issue, and to those online that have been following us. One of the things that struck me from Tim's point is there's so much energy and experience and expertise in the room. This question of scale, and it will only happen if we can start talking more like this and working together more like this. I love the fact that you're doing something similar. You should go and talk to Stacey afterwards and work out how you can cooperate. There was a quote. I was doing some background research before I turned up. A quote from Ted Turner, illustrious American businessman. He says, "My son is now an entrepreneur. That's what you're called when you don't have a job." I think this morning we have proved clearly that that's not the case. The desperate need in the developing world to get people up and running with their own businesses is just so critical to resolving those big problems of poverty, but community cohesion, environmental destruction, everything. And I think the job going on from today is not just to prove that into theory, but to prove it in practice. Stacey, I'm going to ask you to say this is your soundbite moment, as we say in the media, to give us our message to take away.
That was a great quote.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. I think the issue around international citizen service entrepreneur, it's delivered by a range of different organisations. Some do urban programming. We just don't. We specialise in rural communities, and that's where our niche is, if you like. I think the issue of scale is very interesting, and I think one of the things you need to remember is that we achieve scale in developed countries by having a thriving SME sector. And that's what we're trying to work towards, to have options and pathways into creation of enterprises that will employ multiple numbers of people through different mechanisms, different types of businesses. And what we want to do is empower young people, build their competence and skills, help those who have the ability to create businesses create them, but also support those who can be employable and get into jobs in other ways. So I think that the challenge for the sector is thinking about how to actually create that SME sector and all the different pathways that the businesses will have to go through to grow and thrive and what they're going to need at different points in their journey. So thank you everybody for coming. Really, really pleased, and continue the discussion. Come and talk to us after this event, but also continue the conversation with Raleigh about the programme and entrepreneurship generally.
And do grab, the report will be available as you leave. I think one of the key capabilities is networking, isn't it, amongst entrepreneurs? They're not going to kick us out till midday. There is tea and coffee. Do go and help yourself and grab any of our panellists.
And thank you to our chair, Oliver. Yeah.